Awesome. Well, Trey, thank you so much for joining us today. As we begin, can you say a few words about your current role and the organization?
Sure thing. Well, first, thank you for having me on, Misha. Great to connect on the video. So I work for Bugcrowd. I am the Chief Trust and Strategy Officer for Bugcrowd. So I have corporate safety. I'm leading the FedRAMP initiative. I've recently moved from a operational CISO role into working with the corporate development and strategy team.
Hmm.
And then I do some of the thought leadership, corporate strategy stuff in terms of where we're going, white space analysis, and looking to expand how we partner with our customers.
I see. So, just to be clear, it sounds like your role is more outward looking, working with customers, not as much internally looking. Is that correct?
I can't imagine FedRAMP being a more internally focused function. I have a foot firmly in both camps. So part of this
Mm.
deals with the business. So working with the corporate strategy and the uh, business leadership. So how we're delivering what we're delivering, how are we performing, how are our customers absorbing and maximizing value capture on how we deliver our services.
Hmm.
On the FedRAMP side, mountains and mountains of security control. FIPS is non-trivial. How we do continuous monitoring and POAMs and the rest of our operational security load.
Hmm.
Still fairly operational.
Certainly, certainly. No, I understand. I just want to make sure that with my questions, we tumble in the right rabbit hole, so to speak.
No,
But
totally
it's
fair.
interesting. So I think that paints the picture of where you are now. And thank you, by the way, for this. And I'm sure people know, but I understand it's Bugcrowd is a bug bounty platform where you have hackers on the platform who kind of probe defenses of various clients and then get rewarded for discovering something that can be used by malicious actors. Is that um, did I get it
Yeah,
right?
I think that's totally fair. I mean, as security executives, as security leaders, we spend a lot of energy on people, process, and technology. We're building programs, we're building tool sets, we're building in detections.
Hmm.
We also do a fair amount of assessment, whether that's powered by auditors or through penetration testing or tooling.
Hmm.
What's really, really difficult is asking or answering the question, how are we doing? And so adversarial testing, having hackers and researchers taking a look at our platform and providing that external expert
Hmm.
feedback from the most diverse perspectives allows us to measure the performance of our program.
Certainly, no, it makes sense. How did you get in this space? I just want to kind of get a sense of the not just the dot on the line, but the arc, the whole trajectory of it. What was the first stepping stone, the first role for you?
Man, it's been a ride. I think my first job in technology, like a lot of us, I built my first computers uh, back in '93. I was sacking groceries, and some gal came in to yell at our shift manager about a internet service provider problem. He had a garage ISP startup, and he hired me as part-time tech support. I was setting people up with internet connections and doing tech support for his ISP. And then my first full time job was doing desktop support, systems management, network management for the Salvation Army out of Kansas City. So kind of started from the ground up.
Interesting. Wow, it's it's interesting because we always ask this question, and then there is never one kind of true way. Some people switch from IT to
No,
cybersecurity.
that's
Other
right.
people go to the army, and then that's kind of the path, or government, and then private sector, or teacher, high school teacher. I mean, there's no kind of one true way. It's interesting, and I know it's since those days when you started, when I looked at it, things have changed a little bit. So the connections are faster, and the surface area where technology touches our lives, I think it's just we can't imagine ourselves without an iPhone, and more recently without ChatGPT and whatnot. So as a result, I think the surface area has grown, and as an outcome of that, cybersecurity becomes more front and center on every level, on personal, family level, corporate, government, you name it. And I think as because of that, many more people are looking into the space to make a career, whether it's transition from technology to cybersecurity, or earlier, even in college, just trying to figure out what to do with their life. And cybersecurity seems like a growing space, and it's because of that versatile nature. It's a little bit of gaming involved as well, because you're playing with the good guys against the bad guys. What would be your advice for someone who is in that position, either early on in the career or looking to make a transition from the vantage point of where you are right now? What would be your advice? What are two, three things in your view, they should focus on to set them up for success?
Looking on a really, really long horizon, the one thing we do know is everything is changing. Things are increasingly connected. I mean, when I first got started, people were just trying to connect to the internet, just trying to make things work. You think about how ARPANET evolved into what became the internet, how HTTP worked, and we didn't have this notion of cookies. Cookies were designed to maintain session state, not just move information. So we can maintain a picture of Misha's connected. Now, which server is Misha connected to? Everything we've done in security has been bolted on. And so when you think about the evolution of how not just the internet, not just technology, not just where we interface with systems has evolved, the first thing would be go into IT anywhere. I mean, anything you can do to build context. We have a generation of folks. When I came up and got started, we didn't have degrees in cybersecurity. We had computer science. We had a lot of engineering, a lot of electrical engineering. We have a lot of folks that in my era that came from a variety of places that had nothing to do with computers and technology. So I would say get started somewhere. We're going to have a population of folks that have never worked help desk, have no user empathy, have never crawled underneath a desk and fixed something, and have lost that connection with our users. And so bringing people over from the IT side into cyber is going to be tremendously powerful. They're going to make great empathetic leaders. I would encourage folks to not just work on the hard computer sciencey and technology and mathy things, but spend time on communication, take an improv class, work on writing. You may be technically correct, but if you can't win hearts and minds and can't build influence and trust, we're not going to succeed in our program, because everything we do in cyber is a proxy function. It's working with IT, or it's working with the business process, or it's working with systems owners, or it's working with engineers. And we can't just bolt on security. We're going to have to empower these folks to own these things. Now with cloud technology and cloud native application stacks, our developers can ship entire data centers without ever talking to us. And we may find out about it way after it's gone live. That's terrifying. When I first started in cyber, we were network controllers. Like, we prevented folks from getting to the internet. We controlled what was in and out, which ports you could use, turning on ports for offices. It doesn't work that way anymore. And so building the background of IT, spending more time over with the IT folks, I think is super helpful. Again, the soft skills. And then when you're looking for jobs, plug into your local conference groups, your community, whether that's ISSA or if that's your DEF CON group, or there's some fracking 2600 folks. Like, plug into your local scene, buy a lot of coffee, spend time talking to people. I would argue that the applicant tracking systems, when you apply through LinkedIn and others, these ATS systems, they're backed by AI and folks that don't understand what we do. It's a form of violence. It's really pretty tough. And so when you dignify the humanity and spend time with folks over coffee or lunch, they're going to get to know you. You want to work with folks that you like. And so there may be a way to bypass some of the violent applicant tracking systems to invest in those relationships and find folks that not only are doing what you want to do, but are willing to invest in you, grow you, coach you, and help you develop.
I think it's such a powerful advice, because I hear so many complaints about specifically LinkedIn, where people apply to dozens and dozens of jobs, don't even get a response. And I know through back channels that a lot of times companies have someone earmarked, or sometimes even hired. Offer is extended and accepted, and only then they post something on LinkedIn just to check the compliance box that they open it up as if to the public. So I think it's such a powerful insight on your part to engage with local community, because these are the people who not only will save you so much time and grief and anxiety down the line, they actually will guide you. Well, this organization is too big, this is too small, but this one is actually growing pretty quickly, and you can find maybe a little bit lower level position that you were hoping for, but it can grow very quickly with the org, and I can make an introduction. This can be such a major unlock versus just knocking on doors on some of those LinkedIn jobs where you can see the count, like 5,000 people applied.
Right.
And it's insane. I don't know. It's beyond.
It's extremely difficult. We talk about a talent shortage, and I think there's dynamic ways through. I hate to call it now the gig economy, but this notion of crowdsourcing gives us the ability to find the best folks for atomic problems like security research. That's what we're doing at Bugcrowd. But if we go the other direction, there are humans that are looking for jobs, that are qualified to do work, and I think it's unfair to ask our talent folks to make sense of what the specific gifts, traits are that are going to make them successful in this role. It's really difficult to pull that out of a document. The folks that are best in cyber are probably not phenomenal resume writers, or are extremely humble and soft spoken, or not necessarily going to represent themselves well in the strictures of an interview or a weeding interview talking to HR. And so, there's a lot of legal and a lot of compliance that goes into workforce management and posting roles and interviewing. But having a handful of folks that are advocating for you, introducing you, can short circuit a lot of those processes.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting that you brought up back in internet back in the day and what it is now. I remember the days when email had 100% response because of the novelty. Like, oh, I got an email, and naturally
Yes.
you would be kind of inclined to respond because it was such a new thing. I still remember those days. But also at the same time, the notion of typing your credit card number into some uh, web page and then receiving goods the next day was just inconceivable to trust something like this where you cannot see the person on the other end of the transaction. It was just inconceivable. So fast forward now, we default trust the system. So the opportunities for bad guys, for someone with malicious intent, it just the surface area is so much more open these days. Is just because technology penetration is so much deeper these days, and also the way people interact, they kind of implicitly trust a well-designed website or implicitly trust a form, a credit card form or whatnot. So it certainly makes our work a little bit more fun because
For sure.
the nature of challenges kind of scaled up with technology. And again, with this in mind, you work with clients, you work with hackers like the bounty hunters, you work with people internally. What's top of mind for cybersecurity executives these days? What are two or three things that everyone is talking about?
Gosh, where to start? So we're 2 weeks after Black Hat, where we spent all this time at Black Hat and DEF CON talking to everyone from operators and security executives to investors and the research community. Um, at this point, so we're the middle of 2025. The last 2.5 years for cybersecurity executives, I think we've all been getting absolutely pummeled and punished on budgets. Things have been pretty tight in the post-COVID era. B2B budgeting and spend has been down. And so folks are looking really hard at budgets between the presidential election, tariffs, and the post-COVID headcount normalization that we've gone through. I think we're all wrestling with this notion of how are we defending every dollar? So zero-basis budgeting has been something that I think a lot of CISOs have struggled with and had to go through. So first and foremost, if you're looking into a security leadership role, get comfortable reading a balance sheet, get comfortable with your accounting and finance, and be prepared to not just talk about based upon best practices or based upon audit or based upon what my vendors have available, being able to defend what we're doing and why, how we're measuring success, how we're measuring value capture and utilization of our existing investments, and how we're allocating people. If folks are doing a lot of busy work as opposed to maximizing their value and impact to the business through their energy and financial investment, that's top of mind. Of course, AI, everyone's talking about AI. I'm sick of LLMs and the AI conversation. Folks are adding chatbots to everything. I think AI is a big distraction. I think it's a huge tool reduction opportunity, but it's still going to take a lot of work. The best data and the best training is where we're going to see AI really make a difference over time. And I don't think organizations have really gotten there. When you look at a lot of the manufacturing, when they're measuring massive savings on single percentage point process improvements, I think about how that applies to the cyberspace. My hope is the boring work is going to get automated and moved a lot faster. The really expensive queries that are hard to load up in your head, and you've got like 5 different browser windows and queries running at different places in the SOC or in a hunt team. My hope is those things become a lot more accessible. And then the privacy landscape is still evolving. So when we look at international legislation from a security research standpoint, still uncomfortable, still unsafe to do research. And we haven't done a great job of creating safe harbors for researchers. Privacy is still, I think there was a lawsuit announced today. We won't overly time restrict the perspective in this conversation, but privacy, every state in the United States has its own privacy law. Major countries and regions have their own privacy standards, notification standards, data governance bodies. I think that could be massively simplified. But I think transparency in our programs, it's becoming increasingly safe to talk about where our programs are on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last piece I'll mention is sovereignty. A lot of our SaaS architectures are just now starting to have the conversation. How do we localize how we not just store data or the encryption key for data, but how do we move our operations to regions that want their data stored, processed, and transmitted from a centralized location in their geo? And so we have everything from small technologies all the way through, quantum resistant um, crypto. Like we've got layers and layers of things to think about on just about every front.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, certainly to echo what you said on the first point with budget constraints, we hear a lot of that. It seems like every year it's you have half the budget but twice the responsibility, and we also hear the term that kind of every time I hear it, I twitch a little. Business accepts responsibility, which often business accepts responsibility without really understanding what the risks are, which also kind of sounds the flip side of it. But if things go sideways, that's your fault. So it's really a very challenging time to be a CISO on the corporate side,
I think
for
it's a good
sure.
thing. I think that's actually a really great thing, right? So CISOs have kind of been at the kid table from the business executive standpoint for a very long time. We're usually placed underneath the CIO or the CTO or the head of engineering because we still speak Radio Shack. We still talk technology and technology controls as opposed to talking business impact and business outcomes. And we could get into the CISO liability and the cyber insurance and the D&O type of protections for CISOs. But ultimately, this level of accountability that's coming to the CISO seat is what's going to elevate our access to the corporate directorship table into the boardroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's net positive. The other piece I'll mention on this is the role of a risk governance committee and how we get the rest of the business to become informed in our risk registers, to be informed and vocal in our trade-offs, and then who help set those priorities as opposed to just us talking to our lead technology leadership person that sits on the board, or sorry, in the ELT and reports to the board. Getting them involved and helping them make those difficult trade-offs means we're executing a plan the business is aligned on. And this is ultimately a good thing, but our role is going to evolve and continue to mature because of this.
Certainly, no, it's an interesting take, and kind of to double click on something else that you said about localization and about various. Well, there's GDPR in Europe, right? So California has its own set
CCPA.
of rules related to privacy concerning Californians, right? So I think there's probably some movement to normalization, but I wonder what's your take given the world is kind of going from very interconnected global place to being more. It's almost like the pendulum is swinging the other way in terms of globalization. Everyone's talking about onshoring, friendshoring, and I wonder what's your take on how this geopolitical trend will play against almost normalization of some of those rules, or do you think it will continue? The pendulum will continue swinging the other way, where we'll have to deal with, as you mentioned, localization in 180 different countries.
Man, Misha, that's a great question. There's so many ways to slice that from the privacy standpoint. I think a big signal for all regulators, all policymakers are wanting to put forward, we were first to, and here's what matters to us, and here's what our constituents care about. And so now when you're handling an incident or evaluating a data breach, you're going to have 70 or 80 different line items for your outside counsel to review on what your notification timelines and protocols are, what the minimum data points are to be included in those types of communications. When we start thinking about the geopolitical ramifications of something like data sovereignty, a lot of organizations, a lot of countries are wrestling with, do we want to do business in this country, or do we trust data to be stored there due to sovereignty and access? There are specific countries where if you place your operations in that country, the government gets access to the data, your source code. Vulnerabilities have to be notified to them directly. And there's no notion of private access because the government should and will have access to your data center, to your application stack, to your stores. And that's terrifying. And so there's a lot of question marks around all of these moving pieces, which leads to the data sovereignty question of, where do we operate out of? Where do you deploy? Can we have localized deployments? And that goes back to the same old question where we talk about, why not adopt cloud services? There are a lot of big companies, even here in the United States, that cannot operate in the cloud. They have to run their own local stores because of the third-party doctrine. And so the notion that the government could contact the service provider and request access to data as part of discovery, and you would never be notified as a customer. And so there are layers and layers and layers of this, and it all depends on your threat model, your customer's threat model, and what your international relationships look like. So all these things inform how to think about implementation or operating manners. That there's so many ways to get into that question. We could spend all day just on that one question.
But it sounds like, I mean, that's what I'm getting is it's the world is not going to have one privacy policy universal around the world. It will continue to be at least somewhat siloed, and this kind of overlays with the type of stack that different companies are running. If they're 100% on-prem versus 100% on cloud, they have different layers of potential, not exposure, but potential things to think about in terms of data sovereignty. It feels like, and also, and from the provider perspective, it's also a choice of which countries, which clients to do business with, and which ones to avoid. It sounds like
fast-moving space for sure. I think an interesting test case is looking at CVE. So we had the concern the end of this last year when CVE almost lost funding. Sorry, I guess that was RSA. So that was what, April of this year, 2025. And so CVE came right up to a point where they were almost not funded. And so we got a 1-year extension. And so, at this point, we're 6 or 7 months from a reauthorization requirement, or if we're going to spin CVE out of the United States government and into its own deployment. Simultaneously, we have all these other actors around the world that are wanting to stand up their own, and for virtuous reasons, stand up their own vulnerability tracking and distribution point. And how do we track this globally? We're going to need a Rosetta Stone to track all these things. And so geopolitical tensions are part of that. Operating architectures are part of that. But from the security operations standpoint, we need to know when we're talking about one specific vulnerability with one function inside of one application, has it been patched? Which vulnerability are we talking about? How do we address it? And so whether we're talking about how we're operating, what technologies we're operating, which countries are we operating in, or who gets notified, all the way back to the balkanization risk of, do our information systems talk effectively across boundaries? There's so many moving pieces. This is not a simple space to be operating in.
For sure. Well, I guess part of the reason why it makes it fun, right?
That's right.
There's never a boring day. There's no boring moment. And well, you mentioned in the beginning that you also kind of part of your purview is FedRAMP. We recently hosted a number of events, and we had various cybersecurity executives from federal, state, local government at various events over the course of the year. And it seems like there is a lot of movement with the new administration, partially with budget issues, with DOGE trying to slice costs. It seems like a lot of programs were cut. From the cybersecurity vendor perspective, has getting FedRAMPed, has this changed as a process? Is it becoming easier? Is it becoming more difficult? Anything, if you could share anything, what would that be?
For our timing, we're entering our 3PAO audit season here in just a matter of weeks. So by the time this comes out, we're going to be head over heels into audit season. There's a lot going on there. I think how DOGE and the refactor of the FedRAMP PMO, it pushed a lot of accountability back to the authorizing organizations, so the various federal entities that want to bring on cloud service providers like ourselves. And so I think that's a net positive thing. I think the principal challenge for a lot of folks is how funding got cut. Ultimately, I think personally, and this is a personal opinion, I think every executive, whether they're public or private sector, should be able to pause and take a look and say, here's how we're spending, here's how we're performing. Is this the best and highest and most efficient way to do a thing? And so seeing the government do that, that might be a once in a lifetime opportunity. At the same time, I have a lot of opinions about how those things went down and how quickly some of those things happened. And there's a lot of moving parts. Something as large as the US government making massive cuts, there's going to be impact. So I'm going to choose to focus on the silver lining and say, it's great that public sector executives have to take a hard look at this the same way that we do in the private sector. And what they're doing is mission oriented. And so the opportunity to partner with the folks that are serving the public sector to help them better measure, better understand their vulnerability posture and improve how they're securing their environment, like that's missional for me. And I think it is for everyone else. At the bottom line, if you're in cybersecurity, the work you're doing is noble. The work you're doing matters. It's trying to make the world a better place. And so those are all mechanics. We have to work within those constraints. And whether in the public or private sector, things change, circumstances change, budgets change. The question is, how do we make the best risk trade-offs regardless of those circumstances? And so we're here to support that.
Awesome. Makes sense. Well, looks like a lot of moving parts.
Of course.
The world is moving, the government is moving, technology is moving, people perceptions are moving. I want to kind of knock on one door, and again, it depends how you're going to take it. You can make it as broad or as specific as you'd like, but I think you have a very unique perspective because you have a CISO role, but within a vendor. And I'd love to get your take. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, and sometimes I'll come across a post. A CISO is obviously angry, posting something like a pet peeve with a vendor, or that they're not going to black hat and don't bother me with LinkedIn messages, or some sort of a manual how to approach me, and bottom line, don't. So like very, very kind of, it comes from a place of hurt, which I also understand because I hear stories how aggressive some of the salespeople can be and how borderline inappropriate some of those outreaches are. Now that you're straddling both worlds, what's your advice? I guess for both, for CISOs, because CISOs, again, they need vendors to build their cybersecurity program, and from the vendor side, what's the best way? What's your advice for CISOs on the corporate side, and what's your advice for vendors in terms of how to fight the good fight, make sure that everyone understands we're in the same team,
Yeah.
And so that some of those emotions don't flare up as frequently on LinkedIn, which is most of the time well, to me it's entertaining, but also it's it's an indication that there's kind of pain that's not kind of fully surfaced. What's your take on it?
First I'd dignify the humanity of both sides, right? Salespeople, so the business development reps, the sales development reps that are reaching out, trying to create an initial contact, they're wanting to earn the privilege of being able to partner with you and invest with you on your journey. That said, nobody likes being sold to. Nobody likes being sold to. Nobody. It's not a fun process. And in technology, being influenced and manipulated is super frustrating, right? That's just not how we operate. It's not how we spend our lives. And so when I think about this, the folks that are reaching out, they want to know if there's an opportunity there to explore. Totally fair. They've got a business to run. And I've got a lot of friends that work at a lot of vendors. I have a lot of friends that have started companies that are in the space. And they're fighting a good fight. They're trying to find a disruptive way, a way to build a more efficient bicycle, whatever it is they're building. And those things are valuable and those things are useful. My questions from the CISO seat are, how do I measure? Like you've got something specific you're trying to achieve. How do I measure what you're doing that would be different? Number two, do I have budget, capacity, or interest to address this year? I'm looking at that. It's 2 years out and I've got fires burning right now. Like I don't have time for this. And so I think there's room for empathy on both sides. That said, cybersecurity executives, they're not working a 30 or 40-hour week. They're not. They're working around the clock. They're taking calls after hours. They've got teams internationally. And so for me, I try to budget a small amount of time every week to take a look at startups, the fast-moving, new disruptive opportunities, new technologies and vendors I don't have a relationship with. At the same time, I'm not an opportunity for everybody, and I don't want to waste people's time. I think this is also a virtuous opportunity to talk about the value of VARs, the value-added resellers. So if you look at the guide points and all the other major VARs around the globe, what they're doing is, one, building a relationship with me and my program and understanding my technology stack, my challenges, my priorities for the year. And when I turn around and say, I want a bicycle or whatever the widget is, they're going to come back saying, look, for your technology stack, here are the top 3 highest performing technology vendors in that space. And so I'll make time in my evaluation cycle to look at them. And so there's something to be said there because they're making me more efficient. They're protecting my people's time. They're narrowing the scope of 100 vendors down to 3. And so like there's false economies and distractions there, but ultimately what we want to do is be professional, polite, and partnership oriented because everyone we're talking to in this space is trying to do good work. And so again, I feel bad for the SDRs. That's a hard grind. Some people love that work. I could never do it. At the same time, I don't need another steak dinner. I don't need another pair of AirPods. What I need to do is be more efficient for my people and be more efficient for my stakeholders, my board, my investors, and my employees.
Certainly. No, that makes a lot of sense. And specifically for startups, and I hear kind of from, because we work with startups, a lot of them Israeli companies. We work, obviously, Affini is a community of CISOs, and the questions that we hear from both sides, the questions in the back of your mind, if you're a CISO, number one, you're making claims. Are they true? So that's the first question. The second question, I understand what you're building. Is it a standalone product or is it a feature in some other product? And
Right.
three, it's probably, I don't know, most importantly or importantly enough, are you going to be around next year? Are you going to continue to get funded, continue to grow, or is it just kind of a flash in the pan and I'll stake my career, I'll bring you in, and then I'll not be supported. So it sounds like you work with startups as well. And what's your take? How should startups handle answering those questions or just thinking about them?
Those are all valid questions. So first, I feel really bad for technology people. I work in technology, and some of the technologies I use are almost indistinguishable from magic. And it's not because I'm not a technical person; it's I haven't taken the time to go deep. Salespeople aren't technologists all the time, and so the old trope I think is somewhat true. The only difference between a used car salesperson and a technology salesperson is the used car salesperson knows exactly what that car looked like and sounded like when it rolled onto the lot. The technology salesperson has no idea whether it really works or not. So for the technology folks that are selling from startups, tell us what you do and do best, and tell us what you're not doing well or not going to do at all. So we can be very clear, here's the value, and we can ask whether it fits into our stack by answering that question. It shouldn't take 5 conversations and 2 hours of investment to figure out what the heck it is you do and what makes you different. The second piece about going concern, are you going to be around next year? That's a very real question mark. And so some verticals, like say finance and others, are extremely well funded. They buy one of everything. They're a great place to find a joint development partnership and figure out, can we provide value to a specific segment? And as you build those war stories, those case studies, that's going to help inform the rest of us whether or not that's going to fit into something we want to buy.
It certainly makes a lot of sense. Well, I know that's kind of the route where a lot of companies are taking. There's a subset of CISOs and Affini community who actually are curious and who are willing to bring a technology on as a design partner, because they know if it works out, they can get something like Wiz or Sierra at a tiny fraction of cost early on, and then kind of ride this when the rest of the world is paying full price, so they win. And also
That's
they
right.
get to
That's right.
they
There's a
get to
lot of value in
direct.
that if you have the capacity for it.
Yeah, and then they get to direct the roadmap a little bit so that the technology is built with their concerns in mind, not just kind of off-the-shelf solution that hopefully fits. So it's, but I guess it takes a certain person who has the bandwidth and the curiosity and the wherewithal to bring someone on board. Makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Well, Trey, this was lots of fun. I guess last question that we always ask: you have a crystal ball and you can see into the future very clearly. 12 months from now, CISOs, field CISOs, VPs, vendors will be worried about, curious about, anxious about what 2, 3 themes. It could be technology, it could be threat actors, it could be societal changes. Like what do you think would be top of mind? And it's an excuse for me to call you 12 months from now and say, hey Trey, let's revisit your prognostication. So
I think 12, 24, 36 months from now, I think we're still early in the ransomware universe. We have connected a way to take targeted exploits and vulnerabilities and chain them to real revenue and value extraction for criminals. And I think we're far from done there. My hope, if I could be aspirational on the positive side, is that ICS SCADA vendors are going to move towards more of a zero trust capability. And so the belief system of, gosh, we need to air gap our manufacturing or our production network. My hope is that comes to the end in the next 3 years. I'd love to see that as a thing in the past. And there's highly resilient technologies that, wow, this got exposed to the internet. Look what happened. Nothing. I would love to see us get there. And I think the notion of, so we're still dealing with the, I'll call it the state actor IT worker problem. I think we're going to see a lot of movement on identity proofing and how we're verifying identities in the interview process. I think that's going to evolve. I'll wave one more crystal ball, and I think this one's entirely too fast. In 3 years, I think the SCADA thing, the air gap thing, could be solved. My hope is the use of the US social security number as both a username and a password, some kind of secret. My hope is that sunsets. And we've got more of an SSO oriented way of externally validating. I'm buying a car, do a credit check, or I'm applying to a college, pull my educational history. We'll have a better mechanism than a very short string of numbers to prove we've authorized that request.
Yeah, you and me both. I go to a dental office and they want me to put my social security number on a piece of paper. I'm like, let me talk to your CISO. And they're like,
That's
yeah.
right. That's right. Here's to hoping, brother. Here's to hoping.
Exactly. So it's awesome. Trey, this was so much fun. I hope we'll get to do it again in 12 months. We'll get back and we'll review your forecast.
Here's to hoping. Well, Misha, thanks for having me on.
Totally. What's the best for listeners? What's the best way to connect?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. LinkedIn's probably the easiest way to connect. You and all the salespeople, come find me there. That's probably the easiest way.
Awesome. Trey, thank you so much.
Cheers. Thanks, Misha. Good.